Today is March 30th, 2022, and we are in the synthesis session on our track on pandemic disasters. Our co-champions are here, Ram and I believe Gary, and our chair of the Ontology board is Ken Baklowski. Dr. Ken Baklowski is today going to start us off on how we deal with synthesis of pandemic sessions that we have had so far. So with Ram's permission and everybody else's, I'm going to request Ken to give us an overview of what we have learned.
Great.
Thank you, Ken.
Okay, what I'm trying to do here is to get the synthesis started. This series of slides I collected, I think, what I felt were the most useful slides for purposes of synthesis from the various talks. And so this is, I want to emphasize, I'm not actually doing the synthesis. I'm attempting to start the synthesis. So let me see if I can fill the screen. Okay, so let me just remind people of the basic background of pandemics. They do have different characteristics. So I listed there the three current ongoing global pandemics. They're all roughly the same order of magnitude in terms of fatality rates. And there's a lot of data associated with pandemics, and it's big data. So there's a lot of volume. COVID-19, probably over 1 million papers at this point. A lot of variety of the data. Lack of interoperability leading to silos. And there's a bit of hasty publication going on. Of course, there's a certain urgency that people feel about these pandemics. So oh, Matthew, you're here. I just noticed.
Yeah, I managed to get a bit ahead of where I thought I was going to be, so I thought I'd join you.
So you should. Do you want to talk now or right after me?
Whatever fits for you. At an early opportunity, but at an appropriate one.
So let me run through mine quickly, and then we can get to yours.
Yeah.
Okay, so the variety is hampered by hasty publication. So it leads to ad hoc formats, unspecified semantics, and inconsistencies. And of course, there's intense velocity. COVID-19 is very active. The others are not so active, but still active. And there's question of veracity. There's mostly we find that these papers are accurate, but there was a paper recently that found a negative correlation between the accuracy of articles and the amount of social media sharing. In other words, the less accurate the article, the more likely it was to be spread around. And of course, now Matthew is here, and hope you'll be talking about the value of data. Now,
I was going to talk about the impact on disasters, but I can talk about value as well. I'm just going to look for a slide on that.
Yeah, that would be great. I didn't really cover that in what I'm talking about. So now, what I did is I sifted through the 4 sessions, and I identified a number of topics that seem to be the ones most emphasized. So there are a number of goals number of challenges, various approaches, and of course, ontologies. Here is a slide from one of the talks, which gives an architecture for disease and pandemics. So I think this might be useful for us during our synthesis. Now, the first session was actually a little early. Chris Mongol and Justin Reese back in February. So here's one of the slides. I believe Gary provided this. And I think he also provided that architecture slide I just showed. And so you'll notice some of the issues of semantic resources and how they come together in a workflow for vaccine development. Another slide from Mongol and Reese showed goals, challenges, and approaches. So they looked at some of those that I mentioned in my earlier slide. So I got that list of topics partly from this slide. So I kind of highlighted the topics that Chris and Justin talked about on this slide. Then in the second session, Asiya Yulem gave a post-workshop report. So in a way, this is itself a kind of synthesis. So there's a lot of material here we could use for our synthesis. There was a motivation for what one does with ontologies in this area. Harmonization was a big aspect of it in her talk. And she mentioned 3 tiers of harmonization, which I think would be very useful in trying to synthesize for us in our synthesis session. Notice that there are different kind of levels or tiers of harmonization. And then this is one of the communities that came together to do harmonization. And I came up with a number of take-homes, which summarized, what she observed in during this workshop, and gave some final thoughts. Again, this might be really useful for us as we pursue our synthesis. She covered a lot of these topics. I highlighted them there. Then on the 9th of March, Michael Labellis and Viswanath Dutta introduced this KODO ontology, and they are going to be publishing it's a chapter or book dealing with how the semantic web technology was used to combat the pandemic. And they came up with some interesting summarizations, like identifying the various types of systems that they saw in dealing with the pandemic using semantic technology. So clinical trials, data analysis, drug repurposing was a big one. Harmonization, which Asiya also talked about. Semantic search, which Maria discusses. Statistics, surveillance, and vocabularies. So they gave a summary of findings, which is kind of interesting to see how 75% of the systems did not use OWL. It tended to use property graphs or knowledge graph type technology. And 72% had machine learning as a relevant approach. So these are the topics that they covered. Perhaps I may have missed some, but I think these are the main ones. And then the last session, Maria discussed personalized searching for COVID information. And she gave an architecture. And this is interesting because it kind of brings together the crisp logical reasoning with the vague kinds of questions that people ask about the data sources. So here's an architecture that kind of attempts to bring these two together. She made use of this case-based reasoning as a way of dealing with, crisp and vague in the same architecture. So she covered these topics. So you see there was a lot of coverage of the various topics. Many of the speakers covered the same topics. And all of those should be used in our synthesis